I went out west to San Francisco, and some friends of mine who had relocated there from Ann Arbor were involved with this thing called a preschool. It was a project, something or other, and went down and volunteered with them a little bit. And I thought, geez, I really do have kind of a connection with kids, and maybe I should go back. So went back to Wayne State University, lived in Detroit. Substitute taught for Detroit. They loved me as a substitute because I said I'd go anywhere, anytime, any day. Then took classes at night, got certified, started teaching in Detroit. So I've got some background in Catholic schools in Detroit, Lake Michigan Catholic here, taught for a number of years at Brandywine. I became an assistant principal at Brandywine, then came up to St. Joe for 19 years. I was an elementary principal, and part of that time also a special ed director in St. Joe. And then for the past 10 years, I was superintendent at Brandywine. So kind of returned to Niles and just retired a few months ago. So this is my second time. I went to a funeral once this summer. My wife says, make sure you get one that's clean. Make sure you get one that's So, second time wearing a jacket. I dispensed with the tie. So here I am with you tonight. So that's kind of me. And just to give you some of the foundation and some of the things I believe in, deep down in my soul, I believe that schools make a real difference in the lives of children. I guess that's a non-negotiable with me. That's the one question I ask people for years. Anytime I interviewed a teacher candidate, I asked them or a principal candidate, anybody who I was interviewing with. I asked them always to describe and tell me about the educator, the teacher, the person in the classroom or the school who had the biggest effect or impact on their life. And invariably, it was the ones I chose were the people who really felt that person made a big difference in their own life. So that's important to me, and I'm also optimistic all the time, and I think that especially where we are right now in America today, public schools have got to be a solution for us. We've got to get something done with public schools, and I think there's some potential for crisis for public education, and I think we need to step up and do something about it. I used to think for years that politics and education were kind of separate, discrete entities, and they were, that there was not much overlap or anything going on with them. That somebody could kind of shut her classroom door and just work with kids and kind of be an apolitical educator and just get on with the career. That's not true. That's absolutely not true. And I think one of the problems is, and one of the things we have to do is, collectively here, this group and across the country, is to convince educators that they are not apolitical. I think that's a big stumbling block, because you got a whole lot of folks that, that's politics. I'm just going to teach my kids. Those days, if they ever were such days, they're certainly over now. Okay, tonight, when I'm talking to groups, I like to be as interactive as possible. If you have a question, if you need clarification on something, if you want to embellish or add to anything that I've got, if there's something you think that I said that's inaccurate or anything, feel free to raise your hand and interrupt. I'm not, we don't have to save all the questions for the end, although there will be time at the end for questions. The only thing I ask is that you do be respectful. when you do ask the question, and you try not to grind any personal axes. There was a time when, by God, I had this principal in St. Joe, and my kid was being bullied, and he didn't do it. Probably talking about me. Because I have had that in groups like this, where somebody's, kind of gotten off on their own personal bandwagon. So let's try and stay out of those weeds if we can. So, all right, let's get going into it here. Oh, you got a question already?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do. In what ways do you think teachers can be political and still maintain whatever separation there should be between education and politics?
Well, I think they can, I'm just going to get rid of this. You guys know who I am. Stay informed. Certainly, I think they need to be really aware of the kinds of things that are going on that can affect them on a day-to-day basis. I would submit to you that, and I'll talk about it tonight, but I think it hit the Palladium, Herald Palladium today, that I just throw a ballpark out, and Shane could probably back me up, or Dave, any of the other educators in the room here. I'd say that, okay, the big news was that Secretary DeVos approved Michigan's education plan for the federal department, the Every Student Succeeds Act version of Michigan's, which was rejected by the feds and had to be rewritten and resubmitted, and now it's been approved and it's back. If we went into a faculty lounge tomorrow and asked people, first of all, a lot of very good teachers, I mean, I'm talking about people that are really good, top-notch teachers, may not even be able to tell you what ESSA stands for, let alone that it was approved for the Michigan Board of Education, the Department of Education, and is now going to be in effect here. So I think just the awareness element is huge. Shane, I don't know what percent would you say? Becky, Dave, what? I would probably think even the college faculty would be unaware of something, So yeah, low percentage of awareness. And then beyond that, just probably collectively or even individually talking to people. People know you're a teacher. People know you're a principal. People know. So wheeling out the trash out to the curb, talking to the neighbor and just say, hey, did you know such and such? Did you know? There's still a certain amount of respect for educators in the country, I think, and so, I would urge people not to be afraid to talk. So, not a long answer. I'm sorry.
That's good. I'll pass that along to our middle school teacher's son. The next time he says to his class, Donald Trump is a fascist. That's not what you're talking about.
No, you probably can't quite get All right, so I was asked to get into some history here. We don't need to spend a great deal of time on history, but I think it does give us some foundation for where we are today. So let's talk a little bit about what the government has done historically and kind of what schools are about. So, clear back to, Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin was instrumental in trying to get public schools going, even pre-revolutionary times and post-revolutionary. Horace Mann, some of these giants of education later in the 19th century, turn of the century, early 20th century, John Dewey, some of these people who really felt strong about the public school system and kind of the American dream that public schools really were for the people. Unfortunately for many years, just the male people and just the male white people. But really that whole idea of for the people and public, you go back to I think we're Brown School, where I spent most of my career. That actually was that little school that was built right there on Brown School Road. I did some digging, and historically that was part of the Northwest Ordinance, where a certain section of land had to be dedicated for public education. So there were some wonderful foundations and things that went on. And why were we educating people? Why did people? I think even though the founding fathers had some belief in an educated citizenry. Again, very limited citizenry, male white property owners, kind of narrowly defined, but to them it was at least important that these people had an education and that they were citizens and thinking. And that they're, kind of prepared citizens. Well, prepared for what? Not much. Prepared to go work on a farm. You didn't need a tremendous amount of education. Prepared, the expectations were low. Even with the Industrial Revolution, the expectations a little bit low, lower the bar some. And also there was this, I don't think it was, I don't know my metrics and everything and stats, but it had to be sometime in the early 20th century when the whole notion of the bell curve came into play. And I can remember people teaching me about the bell, and you all know the bell curve. Certain people at one end of that curve were expected to do very well. Certain other people, in that other section were supposed to be kind of the B students, and then you had this big middle where the bell goes up, and then these other people at the tail end, pretty low expectations for them. So, and that was dogma. Everybody kind of believed in that. So that you had something. My friend Bill right here who came tonight gave me a gift probably 10, 15 years ago. Gave me a gift of some old McGuffey readers. It's a tremendous gift. You look at that McGuffey reader, that's harder than hell, folks. The vocabulary and the things in that thing are, man, and the tests, there's actual tests in there. That's very difficult. But the expectation, for, Junior, who's going to be, just going to work on the family farm, or, Sam, who's going to go to work in the, the steel mill or something, a little bit low. The bar was kind of low. The expectation, at least that's my belief. I don't know a lot about it, but, the McGuffey reader was, probably to challenge some more of those kids who were going to go on into more white-collar kind of professional careers, okay? So that went on, and I think that, there was a certain amount of emphasis on morals. There's kind of like a moral tone to that. Those McGuffey readers kind of taught morality and goodness and virtues, and there was all that kind of thing kind of woven through. Prayer in school. How many people are old enough like me to remember saying the Lord's Prayer every day before school started, Yeah, East Side School in Niles. One week I had to do the Bible story every day. Oh my God, the teacher gave you this big Bible story book, and she gave you this. By God, you better not let that thing get in the snow or anything. And, so you carried that. This is a public school, folks. You had to, and there was Christian stuff there. It's just like, and then, at least my opinion, thankfully, in 1962, 63, whenever it was, they got that out of public schools. And so anyway, there's that moral overtone and everything. And I think a lot of underneath that, and again, I'm not going to ascribe petty or malicious motives to anybody, but I think that, that work ethic and everything, I think that helped the Industrial Revolution to succeed. So that, people knew that they had to put in an honest day's work and that sort of thing, you know, and I think that probably contributed to the, you know, kind of the economy of the country, you know, having that solid moral base and everything. So, okay, so I'm going to jump kind of way ahead here to, 'cause I really, you know, schools just kind of went on and functioned. You know, the agrarian, you know, one-room schools kind of fell by the wayside in the 50s and early 60s. When Bill and I went to Niles Junior High, which is a huge building down on Main Street in Niles, we had kids who came from schools no bigger than this room. You know, there were places called Brick School and Thompson School, Electric Light School and Fairland School and Howard's. There were just all these little bitty K-8 school districts all around. And then they set foot into probably the biggest junior high school one of the biggest in the state. So it's a culture shock for those kids. So, you know, I think you saw that the disappearance of those and the consolidation of districts was a big thing. And then when Lyndon Johnson, I don't know how you feel about Lyndon Johnson, in my opinion, but for the Vietnam War, was probably one of the greatest presidents as far as social change and things that happen in this country. I believe that. We could debate that all night over beer, but yeah, I think the things he did were just tremendous. You know, the Head Start program, which we've still got some of those at Brandywine and in Niles. You know, I had some empty space in the Head Start. I said, "You want to rent out space to me?" And I'm taking, not me anymore, but $25,000 a year in rental from Head Start. And I told the school board, I said, that's going to technology. So Brandywine now, I'm not bragging about myself, but we're one-to-one with computers all the way through K-12, because that's where that Head Start money's going. And then it's helping the poor kids down there to get preschool. That started by Lyndon Johnson, Title I, which is a program that, the reason I'm getting into these are threatened right now, some of these. The Title I is a program that helps elevate kids who are behind. Title II is a program for professional development for teachers. You know, all of these were started by this, kind of the Great Society called the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, about 1964. Title IX came a little bit later after Johnson, but Title IX was in the 70s. And Title IX, if you paid a lot of attention to the news last year, that's the big thing with that now is the transgender. As superintendent there at Brandywine, I'd have people call me up and say, "Are you going to let anybody use the bathroom?" Yeah, the older I get, the more often I have to. So anyway, that whole issue and everything, it came from there. The Individual with Disabilities Education Act, the IDEA, special education. I noticed something again that hit the papers. Lieutenant Governor Calley, who's going for governor with the Republican nomination, has a special needs child, so he's got some skin in the game, and he's behind this now to get special education better funding. That it's underfunded in Michigan. I said that. I said, hell, I've been knowing that for years. Special ed underfunded, no kidding. So, okay, then in 1994.
Just an observation.
Yeah.
Special education underfunded in Michigan. Michigan is just about at the bottom in this country in terms of special education.
Of funding? Is that right? Now, does part of that go because in Michigan we do go to age 26 and most of the rest of the country goes to 21? But I don't know.
I had that impression when
Yeah, is that right? Okay. I didn't realize we were that low. That is. Okay, 1994. Give us some background here. Prior to Proposal A in 1994, historically, Michigan schools, the bulk of Michigan's school funding had to come from local property taxes, what you call millage votes. And millage votes were a pain. Millage votes, getting a millage passed and everything was very, very tough in some places. In Brandywine, we lost a millage. I was assistant principal then. And we lost a millage and we had to cut busing. I think it happened here in Lakeshore at one point. They cut busing. And then of course, people were having a carpool and their little kids walking to school. Had tons of kids riding bikes, traffic jams outside the school, picking kids up. All of that's going on. And in St. Joe, early on, when I was a principal here, there was a millage that was defeated. And we held tax hearings, and we were just, people were really pretty shook up about that. Oh my God, and then as educators and school boards and as administrators, you had to resort to some of those scare tactics. We would hold the tax hearings, and Dr. Richardson, our superintendent, would say, I want you to get up and talk about, the possibility of kids having to go to Lakeshore. So you scare people. You tell any kid in St. Joe, you're gonna have to go to Lakeshore. I care. I better get out and vote. And in Brandywine we followed through and we parked the buses. So God, I'm gonna go vote. And so they go and voted in and everything, and then John Engler was a master politician when it came to this thing. John Engler, here's what happened. There was a guy named Dan DeGrow, who was the Senate Majority Leader, and later became a superintendent, and kind of shared this story with some of us. And he and Engler were sitting talking, and the Democrats had posed this state funding model to them. And Engler says, by God, we're going to take it. They're going to offer that up. We're taking it. And he did. He took it. And that put the money in his control, in the control land. It was no longer at the local level. The money was now coming from the state, and it was coming per child. Why did some of us like it? We liked it because we weren't having to go after our local people for millages. There was an increase for some of the poorer districts. And so, so it was kind of a win-win. It was perceived as a win-win for a number of years. And then along about that same time, those of you that maybe you can remember that been in education a while, I think it was along about that time, early 90s, maybe even late 80s into the 90s, you started to get that assumption that the feeling that the bell curve no longer applied, and so there was this belief among educators that every child should be able to learn, every child should be successful, that you're no longer going to write off groups of people who can't handle the bell curve. So so the big tent, the big umbrella was kind of all this coming into play there in about the 90s. And then you had people, Governor Engler among them, and many other people, who felt that schools need to be run more like businesses. Oh, if schools were like businesses. Dr. Richardson, is Fred still around? I should have invited him tonight, Republican guy that he is, I remember, he says, I went to Rotary Club, and Fred said, he said, there was a guy from Whirlpool there saying, why don't you run things like a business? And I told him, and Fred wasn't shy, and he says, I told the guy, I said, good, fine, let us control our raw materials the same way you do. You take any kind of steel for all your refrigerators, you take it, then we'll just take the best kids, and then, so you kind of shot the guy down there, and that's true. It's a good argument, you don't, it's a people business, and so these people thought that, you run it like a business, and you're gonna compete, and, for crying out loud, when I became superintendent at Brandywine, I had to start something called a marketing committee. I didn't go to college, and I didn't, work and get a doctorate in education so I could run I'm gonna market my school, we're gonna, a couple of years ago, those of you, maybe you actually heard me, I was on the damn radio up here doing ads for our cyber academy, the Brandywine virtual, Brandywine, academy, innovation academy, excuse me, come to school, geez. People say, why are you doing those radio ads? I said, I got a face made for radio. So all those things in the business model are coming in, and then along about that same time, you've got the folks really believing in data. So for years we gave them meat tests, and we gave, we're giving a meat test. Oh yeah, okay, kid, do your meat test, and yeah. Bill and I remember people back, Iowa tests, they called them back when we were kids, there were people with actually, fill in they'd take a ruler and fill in all of column A. Move the ruler over here and fill in all B. One smart kid, you might have told me about this kid. This is great. They would take like a layover grid, because it was in the days before scanners, and they'd lay it over and then, lay the holes over if they match up. This kid was smart. He filled in every single one. So if you lay it over, it's bound to cover again. You're bound to see the right ones, So anyway, that's the way, and, so what? The kid didn't take a test seriously, so, but then the data became important. And, my God, we're gonna look at data and we're gonna see how it does and everything. And yeah, I'm not, you can tell the way I'm talking, I've got my own opinions about this, and I think there are some good things about it. Yes, we take test scores and we see how kids are doing. It's worthwhile to measure how kids are doing. It's worthwhile to take some of that information and target what a kid needs. And, it's worthwhile for a kid to look at how he did on a test and set goals and then try and do better. It's worthwhile to learn what a kid's called Lexile score. I'm getting into education speak here, but to see what that is, and to see if a parent knows what book is appropriate to come to this fine library and and check out for the kid. You can get that through this. There's good stuff in data, but as we can see, it gets used the wrong way.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, please.
Do you think we're getting near the end of that data-driven stuff? Are we still in the midst of it?
Talk to any teacher who still has to be evaluated.
Right.
Not
yet.
No.
Okay.
No, I think they're given, the new ESSA is given a little more latitude, I think. But, yeah, it's still going to be there. Okay, so as an outgrowth of this stuff, okay, especially in Michigan, Governor Engler saw this, at the state level. Proposal A came in 2 years later, 1996. Michigan's going to have schools of choice. So any public school that votes to participate in schools of choice can now do so. Okay, again, it is a local decision. There's certain places, I don't think, Shane, help me out here, Berrien, Cass, Van Buren, this corner of the state, I don't think there's any board that opts out. Okay, over by Detroit, Grosse Pointe, probably never going to be a school of choice. I think Birmingham, Northville, a handful over there. they're not gonna, it's not gonna happen. But yeah, I mean, Brandywine, my goodness, they're probably, some years we had 25%. We would have been a little bitty class D school if it weren't for school of choice. So, that's been around. So, 1994, I looked it up because it didn't seem like it was that long ago to me. But 1994 is when Michigan passed the law to have charters, have charter schools. It just doesn't seem like it's been that long ago. So here's some things to clear up about charters, okay? You can have for-profit charter schools or you can have non-profit. Now here's one of the things, and even I, because we didn't have charters down, there was not a threat, I guess you'd call it, or a competition with charters for me, either in St. Joe or at Brandywine, so I didn't pay a lot of attention to it. But one of the things, there's an assumption you can make that a profit, just because it's chartered by a university, that it's non-profit. Not so, okay? Not true. You can be chartered by a university, and the big ones in Michigan are Central Michigan, Western has them, Grand Valley is a real big one. The Detroit Public Schools, actually a public school, can set up their own charter system and have charter schools within it. And here's an interesting one, Bay Mills Community College, way up in the UP, where it's Brimley, Michigan. I think it's up somewhere between the Sault Ste. Marie and who knows, Brimley, wherever that, I think it's out there, out there in the middle of the UP someplace, they are chartering. But what they do then is the authorizer can be, sounds like a nonprofit and everything, can work with an educational management organization, EMO. And then they can contract, and those are the for-profit people. A big, huge one in Michigan is called the National Heritage Academy. It's out of Grand Rapids, the Voss country. Okay. Another one that started way back, and again, I prepared for tonight. I looked it up. There's very few left in Michigan, but that was Edison. Edison was a big operator. Now there's only a couple Edison schools left in Michigan, interestingly. So anyway, these folks. Now, a charter school can't go after like a bond. They can't go after sinking fund millage or anything. They don't have like a geographical entity of voters that they can go after. But what they can do is they can get some of these for-profit companies to come in and then contract with them. And a lot of those places are from out of state. There's a school over in Highland Park, which is, I actually used to live in Highland Park. It's called an inburb. It's a very poor city surrounded by the city of Detroit. Hamtramck's another one over there. But Highland Park's all charters now. And there's a good article in New York Times from New York Times Magazine from just September of this year, detailed what this gal running this school had to do. And she had a outfit from Minneapolis, Minnesota, come and inspect her school because and these are people trying to make money off the school, because whether they were going to take a risk and then loan them money to upgrade the facilities of the school. So they're walking around doing this. So yeah, business and school in Michigan are tightly merged. Yeah, you've been holding off on me.
I just want to say, I am a retired teacher, and when the charter bill passed in Michigan, those charter schools were all going to be tied to higher education universities like Central Michigan University, and the intent was never for them to be for profit. When that was promoted, in the early days.
Yeah,
And that for-profit evolved
okay,
with the whole concept of the corporate America thinking that schools needed to be more like businesses.
makes sense.
That's where that all came in.
Thank you, that makes
But the
sense.
initial proposal for charter schools in Michigan was to be tied with higher universities, and they were to address higher talented students that may not be getting the education that they needed in a regular public school. That was the initial.
Well, that's like the old model of, I don't know, when I went to Michigan, right across the street from my dorm, I lived in a place called East Quad, but right across the street was what was called in those days the University High School. And it was operated by the University of Michigan, and a lot of professors, kids went there, and anybody could go there, but it was, it was kind of like what you're talking about there.
Well, at that time, the arts were starting to be cut from schools, and so there was a focus that charter schools could bring some of those programs to kids that they may not get in the public school because they were getting cut.
Well, I don't disagree. I certainly had noble motives. But
but it
right
got
now,
corrupted.
80% of the charter schools in Michigan are for-profit.
Yeah, I know. It's disgusting.
That's higher than any place in the country, even California. And there's people like the Walton family, big, of course, the DeVos family. The guy, I can't remember the guy's name, but the guy who runs Netflix in California. California had a big, kind of referendum on charters that passed, and they, the Netflix guy, and again, maybe some noble motives. This guy wanted the charters in LA to do more of the CTE, the career tech, STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, to focus more on that, which the ones in Michigan don't do. Okay, and then one of the things that's happened within the past 5-6 years has been a big surge in the cyber charter schools. Now there's public schools. Brandywine Innovation Academy is what we call blended school, where the kids, the way we did it down there at Brandywine was if a kid wasn't keeping up on his or her lessons, we made them come in. They had to start coming to class and show up and everything. If a kid had the computer and was diligent about doing the lessons, and we could pretty much assure that it was the kid doing the assignments, making them come in now and then to take the tests, and do some of the things like that. Then the kid could, pretty much not have to come to class all the time and everything, but, not keeping up with work and everything, then we'd make them come in. These cyber charter ones, they don't have any rules at all like that. I mean, there's an outfit out of Virginia called the K-12 Incorporated. Multi-million dollar company. They run a lot of these cyber charter schools, and they get the same money. Is it the same, Shane? Or there was a proposal to reduce it some, but
It's the same.
Same foundation grant. They get the same amount of money to educate a kid as we do in the brick and mortar schools. So and the sad part about all this, and I know I'm going on and on about charters. I apologize, but it's important because of who the Secretary of Education is. The sad part is that by and large they're not successful. The big dream in Detroit was that these things were going to outdo all the Detroit public schools. And you got not the majority of kids in Detroit, but I would say probably damn close to 50% are either going to a charter within the city or they're going school of choice outside the city. Someplace like Southfield or Oak Park or Ferndale or Royal Oak, the ones that are accepting school of choices. So that's where they're at. So the Detroit public schools have fewer. Now, again, I think your point Are all charters bad? No. There's one called a nonprofit one. There aren't any in Michigan that I know of, but called the KIPP schools, Knowledge is Power Program. I've heard good things about that. Rigorous education, almost like a Japanese model, where the kids are going later in the day. Kids are going. Some of them are going on Saturdays. Teachers are working like crazy, to the point where some teachers, I think, said they're overworked, burned out, and quit the program. But there's a high level of commitment there. Problem with that program is, what I found, I'll get to you in just a second, is from what I can tell, they're not necessarily selective in their choice of students over the summer, but you got to get in there. If you don't get in by the start of school, that's it. They're not taking any enrollments throughout the year. Well, come on. I've seen kids' school records, at Brandywine especially. You look at a little kid, maybe these kids could be in like second grade, and the school records come, and a lot of them got sent to our office. So I would just happen to glance, and you can see the cover on the outside front cover of what's called the CA60 Students Cumulative Record. It shows every school the kids been to. And there's second grade kids that got like maybe 8 schools they've been to. They're changing, they're in here, they're moving, they're going homeless. The parents are getting incarcerated. They might be, grandpa may be over in South Bend, so he's been to South Bend, and then maybe he's living with his aunt the next year, or maybe then the mom gets out of jail and the dad, whoever, and then they're moving to Buchanan, and then they're going to Niles, and then they're at Brandywine, and then they're maybe back at South Bend, and then they're back, So yeah, if I ran a charter school and I said, oh yeah, everything's off after Labor Day and we're not taking any more new kids, and I got the kids I got, I'm going to work with them all year. Am I going to do better than a lot of people? Hell yes, I'm going to do better. Okay, now, I didn't mean to.
Well, no, so like into that one, I have a friend who was the administrator at school. She started out as a teacher, and she was uncertified. She ended up getting teaching uncertified, but I went for a master's, and she got hired as a teacher. Which was great, except that they paid them significantly less than you would make as a public school teacher. And
Charters do that.
Well, no, I know, but she worked from like 6 a.m. until 6 p.m. and she had mandatory homework hours, 2 hours of mandatory homework time she had to do with those kids. And she had to carry a school phone at night. She was nothing if she didn't receive phone calls at 11 or 2 in the morning. Like one night, her principal, who was not
sounds worse than the superintendent's.
Called her so they could go dig a kid out of a club. Like that, and so their teachers burn out super fast. They're making like $32,000 a year for that kind of. I mean, it's not a life, you can, so you don't have certified teachers still. A, B, the other side of charters, I would say, and I think you might agree, is that when the parents who select a charter skim the cream off our public school system.
Yeah.
And so they are the ultimate downfall of our public schools, right?
Yeah.
Because
very good
when
point.
you pull all the most committed parents out and put them into charter schools, what is left in our public schools? And that's not a dig on those parents who are there or the parents who are still committed. There are still committed parents, but you are pulling the majority of parents who care.
And the very same thing happens with school of choice.
Right, exactly.
School of choice, we don't take any kids at Brandywine if they've ever been suspended. In school suspension, out of school suspension, we don't take them. And we don't have to. So, people would call up, and say, I want to appeal, the high school principal said, my kid, can't get in, he's been suspended. Well, that was this other kid's fault, And I say, no, ma'am, I'm sorry. We just set the rule. So consequently, some of the bigger, poorer districts, Niles, Benton Harbor, so, a lot of the kids who are left behind and staying there, kids that have been suspended, they can't get the option of going out or expelled. And then they're back in school.
And schools kick the kids out who can't sustain, they get kicked back into the public school.
Well, yeah.
That's the other side of that.
That's one of the horror stories of the charter, yes, and that happened, poor Benton Harbor. I mean, I don't know how many times I heard this from, several superintendents where a charter school would enroll a kid, get the money for the kid sometime in November, or, you know, right around conference time. Well, you know, Mr. Jarpe, maybe this school's just not quite the fit, or you know, maybe it's not quite working out, and you know, and if Mr. Jarpe is uneducated about his rights and about about what he can stand up for this, with his kid and everything, you might just think, oh yeah, gee, I'll go back and enroll him back at Benton Harbor or at Niles, or you know, whatever the place is. And I'm a lot with special ed kids. You know, the percentage, it's about the average in Berrien County for a K-12 public school district is somewhere between, I think, 13 and 15% of the kids have IEPs. In the charter schools, it's around 6-7% of the kids with IEPs, special ed. Yes.
You know, one other thing that I think we need to recognize with charter schools, I know the kid who lived in New Orleans for a while, and in New Orleans,
After Katrina, they took over. Yeah.
So KIPP really runs the public education system in New Orleans, and they do educate students well, but they are undermining the educational profession very badly, because almost all the people who are teaching there are Teach for America kids. They are not certified, they're paid terrible, they're overworked like you would not believe.
Oh yeah.
And so it's undercutting.
You're throwing those kids to the
your
wolves.
last point on there, they're destroying teachers' unions, they're destroying the profession by underpaying and overworking those people.
And what percentage of those Teach for America kids, teachers would leave within 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, they don't.
So they use them, they leave, and then bring new ones.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You don't get teachers for a long period of time.
I have a personal story about my daughter. My daughter graduated from Michigan, taught Teach for America in the South Bronx. In Beth's school where she taught in the South Bronx, the veteran teachers in her little cohort of 3rd grade, the veterans had like 3 years. You know, you're talking, you know, and the majority of them were just brand new like her, and you know, it was tough, very tough situation. And yeah, she did not stay in the profession. Yes.
I want to make a quick comment about charter schools, and I'm unalterably opposed to them. I just want to get rid of the stereotype. I didn't teach in Benton Harbor. I don't live in Benton Harbor. When people see somebody black, they think that's the case. But anyway, charter schools are a threat to not only public education, but our very democracy. Our democracy is dependent on an educated populace. And when you take off, as people have already said, these schools and these voucher things, what happens to the people who are left?
Yeah.
And charter schools are hurting. I taught at Coloma. The kids aren't, charter schools aren't hurting Lakeshore, St. Joe, Coloma, so they're hurting Benton Harbor.
Yeah.
We all know the bottom line is you need money to pay qualified people. Why take the money away? And this goes all over the country. And the other part of this thing is, history is my field, and it grieves me how we are so divided in this country, socially, politically, racially. And we have a divider in chief in Washington now. But we have got to understand that public education for all is fundamental to our survival as a democracy. And that is the only way we're going to harmonize this country and bring us together. It's just, I'm going to stop because I just get wound up. And
I'm with you.
The most segregated state in the Union is Michigan. It's not Mississippi. It's Michigan. You know, the white flight and all this kind of stuff. We just need to. I need to shut up. We just have to be concerned about our survival as a nation.
As a democratic.
As a democratic nation, it grieves me. I mean, our most staunch ally, Great Britain, you know, we're there. If you watch the news tonight, I mean, it's, oh my God. Shut up.
All right, couple more, and then I do got to. All right, yeah.
Would be in regards to the Constitution, and this is what Betsy DeVos and Bannon are saying, is the dismantling of the federal government. Schools do not fall under the jurisdiction of the federal government according to the Constitution. They are state and
That's correct.
local, which is why Engler could come in and do what he did.
Yeah.
And that's probably where we need to be putting our energies, is not with Betsy, but at the local and state level in terms of keeping our public schools.
Yeah, that's good.
That it is not a federal issue, it is a state issue.
Mary Ellen.
It is we are educated and funded by the state.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
And
Yeah.
so very
Snyder
little
wants to do away with public schools. Now, that's what's behind a lot of this. He does not believe in public schools. Neither does the law. They want the public schools, they want the schools to be a profit. They want to make money. And they are trying to charter schools, individual schools, schools of choice, home schools. You don't need public schools. What's left in the public schools is no money. So what are you going to do? We need to know that the bottom of this is they are against public schools. That's what I think.
Well,
We're going to organize politically.
Okay, along about that same time in the 90s, we started to see the increase in state standards. So I won't spend a lot of time talking about that, but you know, it used to be in Michigan, the only required subjects in high school in Michigan were civics and phys ed. That's it. You had to get so many credits to graduate, but you could take 4 years of auto shop, and I took, in high school I stopped taking math after geometry. Fortunately in Michigan I could take a logic class that substituted for my math requirement. Finagled things here and there, but yeah, I mean, you could get away with that sort of thing. But now the state standards came, and then this is big. Is that in early 2000, about 2001, 2002, I forget when it officially passed, but you had No Child Left Behind. It was a lofty phrase. It came in under the Bush administration, but what came with that, along with, this really ushered in and made more official the whole notion of accountability. Along with the accountability, a big thing with No Child Left Behind were sanctions, all tied to what I said a few minutes ago, the data. So the data, the data guys in D.C., and believe me, Arnie Duncan, this is not just Republicans here. Arnie Duncan and all of the Department of Ed people under him, these guys, they didn't know education, but they knew data. They believed in data. And Obama swallowed it, and and it became important. So that in probably about 2010, Obama's version was called Race to the Top, and this was a competition among the states to get money. Some cynical superintendents called it Race to the Trough, which we did in Michigan. We raced to the trough. And that, folks, is what ushered in the evaluation system. In order to qualify for the race to the top money, which we didn't get it. We had to have this complicated, almost draconian evaluation system that, made teachers feel bad. And, again, Mary Ellen, you talk about anti-education people in Lansing, and one of the big reasons, the terminology, right, and the roots of this evaluation system, the terminology that they used, and they forced people like superintendents, principals to use this terminology, so the best teacher was highly effective. A redundancy. I mean, my father would, tell me anytime I use redundancies, you don't talk about new innovations. It's either new or it's an innovation. You're either high or you're effective. Highly effective, it's a redundancy. Okay, and then you're effective. I always thought, effective, I was doing pretty good, doing what I'm supposed to do. I could be highly effective. And here's the worst one. Minimally effective. If I walked out of here tonight and somebody told me I did a minimally effective job, I would, I'd go down to, see if that little red, I used to call it the red coach in Stevensville. If it was still open, and I'd, give me a double, I'd tell the bartender. Minimally effective, don't call it that. Call it developing. Call it novice. Call it, whatever. I'd say developing is a good one, but So, principals are forced to look at evaluations and call people minimally effective. Well, principals, I was a principal for the bulk of my career. Principals are pretty smart people, they can look at the writing on the wall, they can say, I was born at night, but I wasn't born last night. And I'm not going to start calling all the people on my staff minimally effective and then go to work with them every day for a year, So yeah, the Mackinac Center and some of these people are saying, Michigan, there's only 1.6% of the teachers are called minimally effective. Well, yeah, change the terminology. It's a very simple thing called developing, and somebody's, especially a young teacher is developing, call it that. But so evaluations came into play, and then a big, heavy emphasis on data and student growth. And it's going to be this year, next year, 25%. Next year, 25% of the teachers' evaluation is going to depend upon a test score taken in the spring based upon the fall test score. How much is that student growing in that year? Okay, Common Core. You don't hear much about Common Core, but during campaign season, boy, that just gets people, out there with pitchforks with their hair on fire, and Trump is saying, Common Core is gone, he didn't even know what Common Core was, but he said, Common Core, we're going to get rid of it, and so, you don't hear much about it anymore, but it's not that bad, folks, it's a set of standards, and it does not dictate to a teacher how to teach. Is it misused? And some people are using how, yeah, I think so. Little kids coming home with math problems, and parents are scratching their head, why are they making you do it that way, And so, those kinds of things, I think that's a question between parents and the teacher, or the principal or somebody, work that stuff out. So it's not a bad thing, but it became, big political rallying cry in recent years. So, okay, we talked a little bit already about the the Every Student Succeeds Act, passed in December of 15. We'll get into that a little bit more. And I think we just need to talk about the whole movement. It's been brought up by some of you folks earlier, the whole union bashing effort, which, with right to work, which, by the way, was passed in a lame duck session by the Michigan legislature, which we're not in lame duck now, 'cause it's not an election year, but, next year will be another one, so, I think that there was just a perception that unions are bad for people, and I don't know where that came from or why it, it started with some, I'm not saying that, direct relationship, there's some correlation there, so the biggest thing, I think that you can get those kids from poverty to have better attendance records, so that's going to be part of this plan. And we already talked a little bit about the increase in state control. Okay, at the state level, they've got an initiative called, right now Michigan's, I don't know, where do we rank nationally? Probably 40? We're near the bottom 10, and they want Michigan within 10 years to be in the top 10.
Well, you have to pay for education to have that.
Might as well aim high.
Didn't it used to be in the top?
Used to be. California and Michigan were both, look at the places with the most charters now. California and Michigan, yeah. Okay, again, we talked about the ESSA proposal. The state budget, I think at this level, the state's got to get serious about looking at some alternatives and some other ways of funding besides proposal A. I think it's, again, there were some things about it that got away from the villages and, got things at a little bit more level playing field, but there's still a gap. There's still an equity issue between, some districts getting a lot more money and others not so much. We need to look at that. There was what's called an adequacy study, I forget the actual title of the study, pretty much said that instead of the 7,600 something that we're getting now per student, it should be way in the higher 8,000. Duh, we know it should be more money. Is the legislature going to pay attention to that? No, I don't think so. Alpha Shulkin, the budget office, probably looked at that. I don't think so. But I think some things that, the state looks as though the superintendent, Whitson, and some of the people are maybe willing to look at, or some easing up a little bit on the school calendar. We've got to look at some point, we got to look at some year-round schools for kids. One of the biggest differences between children from poverty, I already talked about attendance, one of them. The other one is the summer slide. Kids at Brandywine, they take a test called the MAP, Measures of Academic Progress. Some people call it MWEA test. From fall to spring, when we've got those kids coming to school, we're showing great growth. We're showing good numbers. And then they come back in the fall and they nosedive again. The past couple of years, we've done a thing with Niles. We've used some of the title money. We found out we could do it. Niles has gotten some more donations from it. We did a thing there called Summer My Way, where we tried to get kids coming to school in the morning and then doing some enrichment kinds of things, robotics, arts and crafts, almost like the old, I saw a kid making the old, what do they call it, lanyard, yeah. The old braiding thing. I said, God, I did that in the summer when I was a kid, doing that once, when I was walking through. Taking them to Lake Michigan. We got kids in Brandywine, Niles, 20, 25 miles away from Lake Michigan, 4th, 5th grade kids that never saw Lake Michigan in their life before. What a shame that is. So we take them, that'd be part of their summer enrichment. Get them out there and see what the beach is, see what that Great Lake looks like and everything. So, I think getting a year-round school, getting that opportunity for those poor kids is important. Curriculum, I think we've got to, force the state that, does every kid to get a diploma in the state of Michigan, does every kid need Algebra 2? I don't think they all need Algebra 2. They have given some options on that, so I think they're willing to look at some things, some CTE, things like that. Funding. Ron Jelenic was a state senator. Ron always had a bill posed before the state, and he was a Republican, but he was an educator, to get the state to fund infrastructure for schools. That's it. So they don't have to go after these bonds. Going after a bond for a poor district is a tough sell. When you're in some place like St. Joe Lakeshore, we want a bigger stadium than you do. You know, oh yeah, by God, they got artificial fields. No, that I understand that was donated, but the public will get out now. I know here in Lakeshore they did vote down one of the bonds, and they were going for too much once. But anyway,
we need to wrap it up.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's. Honestly, you read those. I know I apologize. That's kind of fine print, but we've covered most of these. I think one of the biggest things that's got to happen is really restoring some honor to the education profession. I think there's just been a lot of bashing, a lot of things, and the saddest thing that I hear from people in the education profession is they'll tell me it's just not as much fun. It should be fun. I had fun, standing up in front of a group like this and talking and doing things. I enjoy this sort of thing. If all of you were kids, I'd be on cloud nine. I'm crazy about kids. I see my grandkids once a week, and it's just like a highlight of my week. I'm nuts about that. So I have fun doing that sort of thing. And so, to restore that, back and somehow get a measure of that in people. So,
well, John, we are educable, and maybe the solution is to have you back for another one of these at some point.
I couldn't have done this more time. Yeah, well, did you have fun tonight? Yeah, that's the 3 F's, the F words, okay? Food, you guys took care of that. Have fun, I failed on the third one. The third one for a good meeting and the third F is finish early. But if you can do those 3 things, you always got a good meeting.
But we have to clear out of here to keep the library happy. Oh, 15, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, comments, questions, Dave?
That's a great slide, by the way. There's a lot of teacher programs in colleges who they're not getting as many people enrolled in the schools of education. You're absolutely right. There's a teacher shortage. They're not asking for more money. They want to be treated like a study hall. They want dignity. Like you said, that's a great slide. The evaluation system in the old days used to go and say, how can I improve this? What's going to happen with this profession, as we've been talking about, is good people who love kids are going to say they're not applying to schools of education, and there's a reason, and it is a threat because our country was built on people who put themselves up to the bootstraps by hardworking teachers who enjoy kids. But I mean, that's a really wonderful slide. You're absolutely right. It should be fun, and when it's fun, the kids have fun and they learn. The evaluation system. Our principal a long time ago, when these rules were coming in, said, be ready for the era of teacher bashing. And what happens when that era came in, whether it was the evaluation system or whatever, the kids would suffer. But people used to go into teaching, and I still want them to go into it because the kids are great, but nice job.
Yeah. 2 things, Dave, and just a short response to that. 2 things, and one of the things that Bill, Dave, Becky, Diane, Kathy, Shane, all the people that came and went into education all those years ago when they went in. 2 things you knew you were going to get. You knew you were going to get a good pension when you were done at the end of the road. My brother, who's still alive, chose a more lucrative career, law. He's still working. He's 72, and he's still working. And he's still got a lot more money than me. But I'm 67, and I get 2 checks a month from the retirement and from Social Security. That's pretty damn. I know I worked for it and everything, but almost like, geez, I get 2 nice checks a month. So I knew that was at the end of the rainbow. The other thing was, Healthcare.
Yes.
I knew that I was gonna get, I didn't have the highest paying profession, but I knew that my family and my kids were gonna be taken care of with good health insurance. Those two things are threatened now, so those might be a little more mundane and not as idealistic as some of the other things, but, if we can get at those. Okay, couple more. Yes.
I'd like to second what you began with. I think Lyndon Johnson was a Vietnam. And one of the things that he got right, and that the Democrats in Congress got right, is that you do need to not just change the schools, you need to change the social setting from which the children come.
Yeah.
And we are fully capable of doing this. The Republican argument is that the Great Society didn't work, and the only reason that it didn't work as well as it could have is that after a while the Republicans stopped funding it the way it needed to be funded. We need to get people elected, and next year is a great opportunity to our state government and to our federal government who will care enough about kids to not cut taxes for rich people, but use our tax system to equitably educate our children. It's not going to happen unless we get the right people elected.
So we want to point out, we have a couple of candidates in the room as we speak. Dean Hill, a newly retired teacher, state rep in the South County, and David Benak, who's running for Congress, 6th District. Fred Upton has been in Congress as everything's gone downhill. It's time to change that and create balance in our political life. We will get organized. Everybody in this room, I think, recognizes the crucial importance. We can't let it get any worse than it is. And does everybody know Mr. Foster? He is the genius calculus teacher at St. Joe High School all those years. If you don't know it, you need to get to know it. Yeah, he's responsible for my kid managing it.
Audrey?
The proposal A thing, not a teacher, I don't have a kid in school anymore. No, the one with the charter school, your kid is in the school for count day, and we get the money, but then we don't like you.
Horrible thing to have to do.
Why can't we at least control that?
Yeah.
What the state tried to do, and I don't think it fixes it quite, but they did what's called a blended count day, so that if you have a kid in the spring, and then in the fall, and I forget, fall still takes the bulk of it, doesn't she? But yeah, so that addressed it some, but you can't. I mean, it's America, and if somebody wants to enroll their kid someplace.
Well, but why don't we say to the school, they left, why doesn't the money follow the kid?
Well, the other side of that is,
That's the
charter
point.
schools are publicly funded, right? Like, so many of them get a certain amount of state dollars, correct, in Michigan? Yeah. So if those charter schools are getting public funds, they should be subjected to the same rules that public school systems are. So we can't kick our kids out.
I left that part out there.
But the Republicans don't want that.
That's right. Right.
Which they are doing
Right.
for.
You got the wrong people in Lansing.
Their kids back in the public schools, and they come back, but the money doesn't go with them.
That's right.
So there they are.
Be careful, that's a double-edged sword, Mary Ellen. Be careful of that one, because Betsy DeVos would love to see the money follow a kid, especially the title money. They would like to see and going toward vouchers, and so that follow the kid with the money could be a double-edged sword. So I would pay attention to how much we want to advocate something like that. She would love to say money goes with the kid, and then it would just,
But there is a discussion about having the money connected to how many days they're in a school district. There is a discussion about looking at that,
All right.
which I think is really crucial.
Yeah. Okay, Diane.
One of the things I just would like to see is whenever candidates we watch, that they're promoting the feeling that the public school system is the foundation of democracy. I think we're losing, so we haven't played on that enough, especially to the people who, where the flag waving is really, really very important. And diminishing that, but I'm saying how important public schools are to our country, to our foundation as a democracy, and only public schools.
And if you follow that to its really dark end, that if we allow charters to continue the way they are, to be privately funded, those privately funded institutions are gonna eventually have an agenda for those students. And so we will have kids who are saying just to eat McDonald's it's ready. Or
Change at the ballot box, I mean,
you know, like that's a very dark place to go, but that's where we're headed. And so then we will funnel our lowest kids into those really dark places.
when did you ever in your life dream that a guy running for president would stand before a rally and give cheers by saying these 4 words? I love the uneducated. Where was that? Nevada or someplace? Trump said that was. We could look it up, but I think it was after a primary. One of those. Yeah. So yeah, we gotta change it. No question.
One question, is there a system in another country where we wouldn't have this other side of the river thing, where where there's a poor neighborhood in England or Canada? I don't know where there's a good system, but is there a system in some other country that is like healthcare is really universal?
Yeah.
Finland?
Yeah.
But that's a homogeneous population.
Finland, yeah, they don't have diversity. Finland, Denmark, high tax, we're never gonna get that higher. You know, yeah.
We'll tax the billionaires, but we won't solve it all tonight.